hurl everything from rocks. Dragged away in front of the person who reached the line, had taken his helmet. You saw him back on the way. The person was on stilts, and he made his way back, handcuffed and arrested as they worked to take his legs. Also used. We saw those protesters picking up barricades and benches and chairs from nearby Grand Park to shield themselves, setting up a barricade. This actually happened twice in two separate locations before LAPD officers on horseback moved in and cleared them out. And then there were the fires. Likely the visuals that this weekend's unrest will be remembered by. It's already being used by members of the Trump administration and right-wing media after 5 Waymo cars were set on fire. These are driverless electric vehicles. They have those dangerous lithium-ion batteries, toxic fumes into the air. The LAPD sending out an advisory to people to avoid this area, not because of the demonstrations and what has ensued from them, but the air quality, the chemicals that were being launched into the air there, the danger of being in that situation. And so 5 vehicles were burned, literally melting to the ground on Los Angeles Street. And it's now a propaganda tool for those who want to go against the leadership of Los Angeles and California. We are seeing those images of those 5 cars on fire today being used, a literal flashpoint in this fight between state and federal authorities, Mark.
All right, Jory Rand, your coverage will continue. We thank you for being with us on this and continuing our coverage of this unrest in downtown Los Angeles. We have video from before this. What you're seeing on the right there, that's a fire that actually broke out while the chief of police was speaking, while Jim McDonnell was speaking to the news media about the department's response, about his agency's attempt to deal with what is unfolding in the city of LA. You could hear sirens behind him as he was speaking. Where he was speaking from, the office of the chief of police, not far at all from where many of these things are happening, just a matter of a couple of blocks away. And so what we're seeing here is on the right, officers on horseback trying to remove someone, that person who has a backpack, who was not in an area where he should have been. You see them bringing him to the ground. They're going to search that backpack. We don't know if that person ended up being arrested, but we do know that some 10 people have been arrested thus far this evening by the LA Police Department, and some 17 people have been arrested by the Highway Patrol. LA Mayor Karen Bass speaking earlier today about where her disappointment lies with the federal government.
No, my disappointment, as I've been talking to the federal government today, I was hoping to prevent this situation from happening. I was trying to encourage the administration that if they deployed the National Guard in Los Angeles, it would create a sense of chaos. It's the last thing our city needs. Our city is still trying to recover from the wildfires. And you just think about how so many people were impacted by that. And that's an example of where the administration was helpful. And to go from that situation to where we are now is just really tragic. And I think it's so unfortunate. It's the last thing Los Angeles needs. I have no exact timeline. I cannot tell you that. That's part of the problem, right? We do not know. I have heard a variety of days and weeks. I certainly hope that this is over. And provoked.
We are watching now pictures from Air 7 over downtown Los Angeles. And this statement from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth discussing the possibility of deploying U.S. Marines on American soil. That drew a small group of protesters to Camp Pendleton today. More than 4 dozen people held up signs at the main gate there with slogans such as, "We're on a slippery slope to fascism and your oath is to the Constitution." President Trump has already federalized and deployed National Guard members, California National Guard, to L.A. after those protests erupted over Friday's immigration raids. This despite strong objections Saunders is an Air Force veteran. He organized the Camp Pendleton demonstration.
We want to show our support to the military members that work here. We want to kind of remind them of what their duty is to us, but additionally we want to make it very publicly known any sort of action by the administration of using active duty or National Guard troops on U.S. citizens.
Meanwhile, U.S. Northern Command confirms 500 Marines from 29 Palms are prepared to deploy status should they be needed to augment and support the DOJ's protection of federal property and personnel efforts. That is a quote. We will keep an eye on that. In the meantime, we are watching people now milling about, moving from place to place.
This is Channel One America's continuing coverage of breaking news and severe weather. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Denton from the Channel One America Command Center in Atlanta. Just before midnight on your late Sunday night, early Monday morning, we're providing continuing coverage of the protest day 3 in Los Angeles, California. It's kind of gotten out of hand late this afternoon and early this evening, California time, and we've had at least 5 cars that have caught on fire this evening, along with 3 police vehicles that have been heavily damaged. 1 police officer, LA police officer, has been assaulted in a way to where they were up under a bridge and protesters threw things onto those 3 cars that got damaged below, and one of the officers were damaged, rather were injured, possibly definitely assaulted, as the airbag was deployed when the heavy object came down on the officer's windshield. The officer escaped, and other officials were called in. This is continuing coverage of what continues at this hour in the Los Angeles, California areas. Go to ABC 7 in Los Angeles.
So the LAPD is responding, but as the chief himself said, at the moment they are overwhelmed. There are more people causing trouble than there are officers to stop them at this point. And whether the National Guard is in fact needed tonight is something that he says will have to be assessed. In the meantime, ABC News reporter Matt Gutman was behind the police lines earlier today. He showed us the projectiles that were coming from both sides of these clashes.
That line of officers from the LAPD pushing everybody back and using a tremendous amount of non-lethal force. You can see those flashbang canisters, the sponges, 40 millimeter like this, that they fired at people just to continue to push them back. I don't think I've seen this much use of non-lethal in a very long time. We've also seen significant number of projectiles that are very dangerous being hurled at the LAPD on this side of the skirmish line. The size of the rocks and projectiles, I'm going to see if I can try to find another one for you. They were significant. This is a piece of concrete or road that was picked up and chucked. You can see some of the sharper end stones over here, much larger ones than that were Holder police. So this is something that I haven't seen quite some time in downtown LA. It was very intense.
So how are they getting those rocks to throw? Well, they're bringing hammers with them, some of them, and they're chipping away at the curb, chipping away at parts of the street or different places on brick buildings and getting those pieces of rock to throw at the police. And a word about those so-called less, or not so-called, they are less than lethal. They're designed to be less than lethal, less likely to be lethal weapons. They're meant not to penetrate the skin. They're meant to disperse the crowd, to cause pain but not permanent injury. But they can, in fact, be lethal. And there have been cases of people who've been hit in the head by these projectiles, because even if they don't penetrate, it's the equivalent of a very hard blow to the body, and that can, in fact, cause permanent damage. People have had eyes put out, people have been blinded, people have had facial bones broken, and suffered internal injuries from those less than lethal weapons. They are not, however, bullets and are not intended to kill or maim, but they are definitely something that you do not want to be trifling with. As the LAPD is going through this, they are using up quite a bit of those munitions, as Matt Gutman was mentioning, and as we have been mentioning on our air, some of the officers at the scene were starting to run out of those, and they're having to be brought in from other areas of the city because so many of them were being deployed. In fact, you can hear at various times during our discussions and interviews with either police officials or with the mayor, you can hear flashbang grenades and less than lethal rounds being fired, along with fireworks, actually commercial grade fireworks that are being fired at the police by some of the people in the crowd. And as the police chief mentioned, those can kill. So there are acts of violence taking place here. The police department is responding. The National Guard has been called in. And now we are going to see how this plays out as this continues this evening. Governor Gavin Newsom posting tonight on X, "I have formally requested the Trump administration rescind their unlawful deployment of troops in Los Angeles County and return them to my command. We didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. This is a serious breach of state sovereignty, inflaming tensions while pulling resources from where they're actually needed. Rescind the order, return control to California." Those are the words of Governor Gavin Newsom. Let's go to Gabe Santos in Air 7 over that area we've been looking at, that Chevron station there. What are you seeing from your vantage point, Gabe?
Yeah, Mark, we've been focused on this this intersection here at Alameda and Main. This is the next kind of barricade that has been set up by individuals that appear to just kind of continue to be setting up a few of these barricades as LAPD continues to push the crowd more and more north. So this is just the latest one, as I see a few people kind of making a run for it there, but we've been focused on this gas station at the top of your screen, because that's the reason why there's been a crowd around there is just because that's there was such a big crowd that was pushed further north. And I'm trying to monitor a few different things here to see why people are running. But the crowd had been further to the south on Main Street, south of Cesar Chavez Avenue, that intersection you're seeing right there. And LAPD continued to push that crowd further north. So now we're seeing the crowd just kind of scatter in a lot of different directions. So a couple people went to the gas station. We didn't see any signs of looting or anything like that in that particular store right there. So that's definitely some good news. But the concern obviously is individuals that continue to make barricades such as this one there on the right side of your screen that's been, as you said, fortified with a couple of dumpsters and a wrought iron fence. We've seen an item set on fire there next to that fence, but it appears that fire may be out as of right now. So LAPD is trying to avoid situations like this, but they're also taking into account all of the resources that they are pouring into the area, and they have been pouring into the area, and they're trying to figure out a way to balance those resources. So they are not at this time making a push further north to knock down that barricade as they had been with previous barricades. They're just kind of holding the scene as it stands right now, maybe to have a little bit of a respite, have a little bit of a calm, regroup, and then figure out the next move. You see the Night Sun from the LAPD helicopter that is over the scene here. We've seen the Super Puma Rescue 5 helicopter. That's the big LA County Sheriff's helicopter here at the scene as well. They've been helping law enforcement keep an eye on things. That parking, that pay-to-park structure at the center of your screen was set on fire earlier, but LAPD actually moved in with a fire extinguisher, and they were able to put that fire out. We were talking about an individual, possibly with a flamethrower, that set fire to a couple of trees there on Main Street, just south of Cesar Chavez. We did see an individual that LAPD believes to be the individual with that flamethrower taken into custody. So that person has been arrested at this time, and LAPD is going to figure out what to charge that person with, obviously for having a flamethrower and using it on city streets. That will be very serious charges. And you can see here that's Main Street and Cesar Chavez, and that's where a large contingent of LAPD is staging at this time while they figure out their next move. I want to ask Rob to widen out the shot. Let's look to the south of City Hall, because that's where another group of protesters was located about 30 minutes ago, and we haven't been able to see them for a few minutes now because we've been focused on the group to the north, and there was about 500 people down there to the south. It appears that that crowd may have more or less dispersed at this time and maybe gone their separate ways on Spring and First Street, as you can see right there. So LAPD kind of breathing a sigh of relief as far as the south side of their the area that they're kind of watching right now. But you still have a multi-block area of downtown LA in and around City Hall around City Hall, I should say, that LAPD is keeping an eye on. You have that scene at the center of your screen, which may become a crime scene, more or less, the lanes of the southbound 101 freeway, where people were throwing pieces of concrete and bicycles and bird scooters and signs from that Los Angeles Street overpass onto the street below. You see all of that debris there. You see a number of those highway patrol cars, and I think, yeah, those are all highway patrol cars down there. You see that they're parked under the overpass, and that's because the ones that weren't parked under the overpass were heavily damaged by items thrown by people on the bridge. And LAPD, the reason why they moved north to begin with was they had to clear that bridge to prevent further damage to those patrol cars down below. You see one of them on a flatbed tow truck. That is the car that was pretty much set on fire earlier, but CHP officers were able to get in there with a fire extinguisher and put out the majority of the fire before it was completely destroyed. But that's going to be a vehicle that's probably going to be a total loss. You see all that debris there in lanes. That's going to take a while to clean up, and as I said, probably a little bit of a investigation to figure out what charges to file against the people who threw a piece of concrete down there onto the freeway. Those are the southbound lanes of the 101 as you approach the 5 freeway. So still a few prongs of action here that LAPD is keeping an eye on, but it appears, at least for the past 20 or 25 minutes, that we're entering a little bit of a moment of calm while LAPD kind of regroups and figure out what their next move is going to be.
Yeah, Gabe, it occurs to me as we're watching this, there are people driving through the area as if nothing was going on. I think a word of advice would be avoid downtown Los Angeles right now. Just stay out, try to go around it, because you don't know what streets are going to be blocked at any point. You don't know where you might run into a barricade, you might run into a bunch of people who are up to no good. So just stay out of downtown if at all possible. All these vehicles that are trying to traverse the downtown area, I don't know if there are any games or any events happening in or near downtown at the various venues right now, so that might complicate matters as well, just adding to the congestion and traffic in the area. But stay out of downtown if you possibly can. Former Vice President Kamala Harris responding to today's event, she had a statement. She wrote in part, quote, "Los Angeles is my home, and like so many Americans, I am appalled at what we are witnessing on the streets of our city. Deploying that National Guard is a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos. In addition to the recent ICE raids in Southern California and across our nation, it is part of the Trump administration's cruel, calculated agenda to spread panic and division. This administration's actions are not about public safety, they're about stoking fear of a community demanding dignity and due process. Protest is a powerful tool, essential in the fight for justice. As the LAPD, the mayor, and governor have noted, demonstrations in defense of our immigrant neighbors have been overwhelmingly peaceful. I continue to support the millions of Americans who are standing up to protect our most fundamental rights and freedoms." That from the former vice president and former presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Governor Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass leading the charge. They're blasting the Trump administration's decision to deploy the National Guard after 2 days of protests over federal immigration raids. But the war of words with the White House only escalating tonight. Eyewitness News reporter Jory Rand has been following this political firestorm, this fight. Joins us now live from our newsroom with more on that. Jory.
Only growing tonight, Mark. This is a situation never seen before. It's not unusual for the National Guard to be federalized. We have seen it in the past. Most recently, from what we can ascertain, it happened in the 1960s with John F. Kennedy federalizing the National Guard to allow black students into school, as the governor, namely George Wallace, and other officials were not allowing students into school, breaking federal laws. So the federal government had to come in, take over the troops there. In this situation, it is a little different in that the governor didn't want this to happen, didn't give his permission, and it wasn't because federal law wasn't being executed by the local government. It's because the leader of the federal government wanted to prove a point here and take over and use these state troops under federal power. And so both the governor and the mayor are accusing President Trump of inflaming passions to provoke a response, saying he and his administration are the ones who want violence. Here's a look at some of those National Guard soldiers in Westwood today, guarding the federal building there. We saw it in downtown as well. Governor Newsom today formally requesting that the Trump administration rescind their what he calls unlawful deployment of troops in LA County and return control of the National Guard to him. He says we didn't have a problem until President Trump got involved. And in fact, we heard from CNN reporting that the Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis, is saying tomorrow California will file a lawsuit to try and regain control of the California National Guard. But tonight, the president is doubling down on social media, claiming the protesters are paid insurrectionists, and that word is going to be very important moving forward. Take a listen.
You have violent people, and we're not going to let them get away with it. I think that you're going to see some very strong law and order.
So we spoke with law professor Jessica Levinson today, who says while federal deployment of the National Guard is legal, it typically comes after that state's governor makes the request.
The last time that National Guard troops were called up under federal control without the governor's request was 1965. So this is exceedingly rare and legal, but I think what's really important for people to know is unwarranted. There's no indication whatsoever in LA that National Guard troops are necessary to maintain order. The governor has said there's no need. The LAPD has said there's no need. And really all of this seems to be an unwarranted escalation. The president has the capacity, but he shouldn't use it. And it's been very rarely used previously.
So JFK did it in the early 60s, Lyndon Johnson doing it there again in 1965. Now, again, it's the use of the word insurrectionist that will be key here moving forward, because the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and the president have suggested that if the violence continues in Los Angeles, Marines from Camp Pendleton will be moved in to take over securing the city on U.S. soil. Violence play out as he could score political points as things devolve here in Los Angeles. We'll see how this plays out and expect to see some lawsuits filed tomorrow on behalf of the state of California against the president and his administration, Mark.
All right, indeed, Joy. And when you talk about troops being brought in to deal with violence such as this, it's a crowd control issue. And troops are trained in other things. They are trained to win wars. They are not necessarily focused, at least in training, in crowd control and using the tactics that police use in urban areas to control and deal with violent crowds. So that will be a significant element that we're going to have to watch for, of course. And we're seeing here another fire that has been set in the downtown LA area. Gabe Santos is over it. What do we have that's burning here?
Well, it looks like a cylinder of some kind. Some metal pallets. They appear to have been piled up here at the intersection of Spring and First Street. And the LAPD is nearby, but they're not too close. They're kind of letting this be for now. Their efforts are still focused on the situation on the north side, and I'm looking up north of Cesar Chavez and Main Street, and I see another little fire burning there earlier where we were watching those individuals that set up that blockade. And you can kind of see as we pan over from south of City Hall, as we continue panning to the left, Rob, a little further down to the north of where that gas station is, you can see there this new, not a new fire, but it is definitely a fire that has been coaxed accordingly, and it looks like there's a lot of cardboard in that dumpster, and individuals have set that dumpster ablaze. So you now have two bonfires, if you will, illegal bonfires burning in streets here in downtown LA. And LAPD at this point has taken this time to regroup their forces and figure out which one they want to tackle at this time. But you have an individual with drums there, you have this dumpster ablaze, you have another little cylinder there on the ground also ablaze. And as these fires continue, LAPD is going to have to decide which one to tackle, because at least at this time, they don't have the resources in place to take one or the other, unless they really coordinate that and really focus on sending a skirmish line to the north and sending another skirmish line to the south. You're going to have these two separate kind of hot spots, these literal hot spots burning. This one on Main and the other one near the intersection of 1st and Spring Street. So still tensions rising high as individuals continue to set fires here in the downtown area.
All right, this one a literal dumpster fire. The dumpster fire, of course, has become kind of a metaphor for a failure, a catastrophic failure amongst people who should know better. And so this is what we're seeing play out now in downtown Los Angeles. Of course, the fire that has really caught a lot of people's attention and has gone viral, really, the images were those Waymo cars that were set on fire during the protests. A number of them were kind of parked on the street. Remember, these are driverless vehicles, of course, so there was no person inside to kind of get them out or make a decision as to where they should go. They were sitting there, parked on the street, and as the protests and demonstrations were going on, someone set them on fire, and I believe it was 5 of them that actually burned to the ground. Bruce Thomas, our law enforcement expert, joining us now to talk about what we have seen thus far today and what we're seeing into tonight. And Bruce, I heard an interview with you earlier, and you were saying that what we could expect this evening was kind of what we're seeing here, is that there are going to be smaller people who are going to go around causing as much mayhem as they can. That seems to be playing out.
Yeah, these are not the protesters we saw during the daytime who were, utilizing their First Amendment rights. Wow. Yeah, it did get out of control with the overpass on Spring Street, with the CHP vehicles, with the Waymo vehicles, like you said, over in Olvera Street area. But what we're seeing now these are anarchists. These are not law-abiding citizens. These are people that want to cause problems, and they've come into LA to do so.
Wow, and as you're saying that, we're watching somebody who was doing backwards donuts in that intersection, a man driving through without a shirt on with this minivan. Not sure what his intentions were or what's going on there, but this guy's taken off at a high rate of speed. And there's people out in the streets right now. We don't know if he was angry at the protesters or part of the protest. We just don't know. But there's so many people out walking around the streets, law enforcement officers, other people that are out there, and he's putting all of them at risk now with whatever he's doing here. This is just more craziness. In that intersection, seemingly it looked to me like he was trying to target somebody. They were throwing things at his vehicle, and it looked as though he was trying to circle around and try to get somebody. I don't know, but what we're seeing now is he has slowed down. I'm not sure exactly where this is. If we could get our locator up from Air 7 just to see what exactly this guy's. It's Olvera Street. It kind of looked like Olvera Street. Well, he's driving around Olvera Street. He's got no shirt on. It just stopped. I don't know if it bullard there or what, but it just stopped. And now he's backing up.
Mark, I don't know if you could hear me.
Go ahead.
PD is aware of this individual, but I'm not sure if they really know what to do. I was going to say he appeared to be trapped in that area with those blockades, and now he's flying down Main Street back to where that blockade is. Extremely high rate of speed, slamming on the brakes now. This is Cesar Chavez and Main Street, and there's so many people just out walking around right now. I don't know if he's going to slow down before he gets to this barricade. You see some people running. We're a little bit blocked right now because we can't see what's going on the other side of that building. So I'm not sure if this guy in the vehicle stopped or if he continued on. Zoom back in, left or up. I think that's him right there. Yeah. Okay.
No.
not him. So so we just kind of saw this out of the corner of our eye, and I'm not sure if this guy is agitated by the protesters or was with the protesters, but then we saw him doing these backwards donuts, and then other individuals started throwing rocks at this vehicle as he continued doing those donuts at high speeds. Now you see a crowd racing to the east, looks like maybe to the west. There he is now. There he is now, continuing to drive extremely erratically. I'm really worried that this person is going to drive so fast that he's going to run somebody over, because there's just so many pedestrians running around, so many people with their phones out. This guy's already hit multiple things. You see the bumper damage, almost hitting that vehicle head on, and people are continuing to throw rocks at him. This is Alameda and Cesar Chavez. I think that guy was trying to go up to the driver's door. More people throwing things at this vehicle. Again, we don't know the connection this vehicle has to this protest, if any, if he was just in the area and got upset, or if somebody may have hit the vehicle and that sparked him. But this appears to be an individual that is upset, is unstable, and is now driving at a high rate of speed around the Chinatown area and Olvera Street. We're going to continue to keep an eye on this one.
There he is right there. He has stopped. He has stopped occasionally. He was stopped by a Bullard before. He ran into a barricade of some sort, and he's not out yet. He did open the door. There was a lot of front end damage to this minivan. We're going to watch this play out, but look at the speed. Even when he backs up, he's backing up fast. He's hitting the gas pedal hard. There are people out in front of him.
Oh,
my God.
Oh, no. I thought he was going to hit the motorcycle.
It looked like he was aiming for him.
Yeah, yeah. This person is clearly upset and just driving erratically, not in any sort of mental state. That's going to be a part of Union Station, and I'm not sure if we're able to get Air 7 on the other side of that, but we may. Okay, that's the vehicle right there.
I want to bring in
and around. Yep.
I want to bring in Bruce Thomas, because you're watching this too, and this just, if things weren't bad enough.
This may be an enclosed area. This may be some kind of a. Oh, those are the railroad tracks.
But this guy is definitely out of control beyond what normally you would think.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, he's putting a lot of people in danger here. We don't know his motive. All we know is that he's driving really fast. He appears at various times to have been aiming at people with this minivan. People have been throwing rocks and bricks and all kinds of things at him as he's gone through intersections. He was doing reverse donuts in an intersection and going very, very rapidly. He's going through these downtown streets now. It's kind of a maze, kind of a warren of streets, some of them one way, some of them very narrow. He's right by the railroad tracks here.
That's the tracks.
And it's frightening to see. It's just one of the many unsettling things we have been watching throughout this day and this evening, when there have been protests of ICE raids.
Vignes and Botchet.
Vignes and Bochet down in downtown Los Angeles. This is kind of near I believe the Men's Central Jail, the Men's Central Jail down there that's used by LA County. And there he goes. Now, luckily, he's on a street. It's one of those back streets. It's small. And we don't know. We'll have to see if he's trying to make his way back toward the demonstrations to see what his motive may be.
Yeah, he's over by Canasaurus Plaza by Cesar Chavez. He's over in that complex there.
Mm-hmm. And
he's definitely out of control.
And as Gabe mentioned, the LAPD is aware of him. They know that he's doing this, and they're going to try to. I don't know if they're going to try to get him. Who's going to be available to do it? We talked about the resources that have been stretched so thin for the LAPD as they deal with the unrest that's happening in downtown LA. Who's available to chase this guy? I don't think anyone is at the moment where we're seeing it. And do they want to? Do they want to chase him when he's running through these streets at such high rates of speed?
For safety's sake, Mark, they definitely would want to be involved in this. The problem is, I don't think they have the resources right now.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, again, if you're just joining us, Eyewitness News continuing our coverage of the demonstrations, the violence, the charges and countercharges by officials at the federal, state, and local level about the ICE raids and about the federal response, the local response, and what people are doing out in the streets. And in the middle of that, of our reporting of that, we are seeing this man behaving very erratically in this minivan. We're not sure if he's either targeting the protesters or if he's one of them, but it appears at least that he is in some way unhinged. He doesn't have a shirt on. He's driving this minivan at very high rates of speed. There's significant damage. There have been a few collisions with various inanimate objects.
All right,
no people that we know of yet, no vehicles that we know of yet, but it's only, I think, by sheer luck that that hasn't happened. As we see him now continuing, Gabe, can you give us an indication of what street he's on?
Yeah, Mark, this is Cesar Chavez. He appears to be northbound on Cesar Chavez on Gallardo Street. And, you know, we've seen situations to almost purposefully hit other drivers, and that's the really scary part here. We are actually switching out helicopters, so you're going to see my picture in the helicopter that I'm in get a little further away, and we have our other Air 7 on the scene as well, trying to locate this vehicle, but it is definitely a scary situation for anybody that's in the downtown area right now.
Right, in addition to everything else that's happening, and just to recap, there were planned demonstrations this afternoon beginning at 2 o'clock at LA City Hall. There was another demonstration happening this afternoon and into the early part of the evening at the federal complex, the federal building in downtown Los Angeles, just a few blocks away from LA City Hall. Those demonstrations merged this afternoon into about 1,000 people and growing as the day wore on. And that came amid word, of course, that the National Guard troops that were activated and federalized by the Trump administration, by the president, were moving into Los Angeles to, in his words, restore law and order. The LAPD has been dealing with this and responding. The LA County Sheriff's Department has been dealing with this and responding as well. We heard earlier from the Chief of Police. One of the things that was very important that he mentioned was that there were claims in the initial hours of the first evening of the demonstrations, when things were starting to get out of hand, that when ICE and federal agents were requesting help from the LAPD, that the LAPD did not respond or delayed responding for 2 hours. The chief saying adamantly and emphatically that was not the case, that the LAPD was not given advance notice of what ICE was doing, and so because of that did not have officers pre-deployed and pre-positioned so that they could respond in a crowd control capacity, and that officers took about 38 minutes to assemble and then head to the area where those federal agents were, and they were hampered by both the size of the crowd and by the fact that tear gas had already been deployed. Because officers hadn't gotten advance notice, they weren't equipped with some of the things that they would need for a crowd control or a riot sort of situation. So a lot of them didn't have gas masks, so they went in anyway, many of those officers being incapacitated or at least having their effectiveness deteriorated by the tear gas that had been deployed by the federal officers. But the chief saying emphatically the LAPD did not ignore the call for help on that night. Also saying that, here we go, looking at this driver here. This was playing out about 6 or 7 minutes ago. This guy going through, it looked like he was it really looks like he was targeting folks and trying to hit them with his vehicle. But we don't know. We do know that the crowd was very angry at him, judging by what we're seeing in response, all the projectiles being thrown at him. And then he took off. And he then went down the street. You see he's got no shirt on. He's throwing stuff out of the vehicle. I guess some of the, looks like one of the windows got shattered by one of the bricks or rocks. And look at the speed with which he left that scene. Later on, we saw him just driving erratically, again, heading into Olvera Street, running into a traffic control bollard. And okay, is that the vehicle there on the left? Is that, that's it. All right, do we know whether the guy is in there? Oh yeah, there he's coming out. What's he got in the back? He's looking into the back of that minivan. We don't know. If we have a location, at least we can put this out on our air And if someone is going to try to Savannah and First Street, in East First Street in downtown Los Angeles. Again, Savannah and East First Street in downtown LA. This is where that minivan driver has come to a stop. He's opened up the back and he's stepping away. Still, as far as we can tell, with no shirt on. There's no night sun here because there's no LA helicopter, LAPD or law enforcement helicopter to light up the scene or the vehicle, but he did walk across the street. I don't know in which direction he is walking because we can't really orient ourselves in the dark. He's getting into a second vehicle. Getting into another vehicle is what we're being told. Oh, there he is. Oh, there they are. Officers now responding. These are sheriff's deputies. They're putting him in custody right now. There he goes. That is the end of that escapade. We don't know if anyone got hurt. We lost track of him for a while. We don't know if anybody got hit. We don't know if he hurt anyone or whether he was actually trying to hurt someone. It certainly did look at one point that he was swerving toward somebody on a bicycle and trying to hit them, but he did not, that we saw. Bruce, this is just an amazing thing that's unfolding here, given everything else that's going on.
Yeah, for this guy to be driving like that is just dangerous beyond. I'm glad to see that the sheriffs have been requested and are responding to LAPD's request for help. My only question would be, what took so long? Clearly, LAPD was overmatched. And when you declare mutual aid, you get the bigger agency, LA County Sheriffs, which in the scheme of things, they are actually in charge of a civil unrest situation like this. So I would ask why it took so long. And the other thing I haven't seen are some of the other agencies in Southern California responding to this.
Yeah, we're not seeing. That's an excellent point. It would be good to know. It's hard to tell at night too because you can't always see the vehicles or see insignia on patches or things like that that would indicate that someone's there. Sheriff's deputies, of course, pretty easy to make out with the sheriff's insignia on the side of the car and their khaki uniforms. So they're pretty easy to spot. But as far as other police departments or police agencies, we don't know of any that are also helping in this response to the unrest in downtown LA. This is the minivan that guy was driving. They've cleared it. There's thus far, I think there was one other deputy who went through and saw that there was no one else inside the vehicle, but they're going to check it for other things, perhaps weapons, contraband, or anything else that would indicate danger or perhaps have a clue to what his motive was. So in addition to all the unrest, in addition to all the things that are happening, fires being set, officers being attacked, all of that, in addition to that, we have this guy. Driving erratically through downtown LA, putting a lot of people at risk, including police, demonstrators, everyone, bystanders, and he is now under arrest thanks to the LA County Sheriff's. The LAPD having its hands full dealing with what has been happening throughout the day and into the night. Some 10 arrests thus far. We know that number is going to go up. They've been focusing, as the chief mentioned, on clearing intersections, clearing streets, getting people out of areas where they can cause damage or injure people. And the effort to arrest those people will be ongoing. They're going to focus on people who have been attacking police officers, attacking innocent people, and vandalizing buildings and vandalizing police vehicles as well. They're going to focus on that. They're going to, in particular, perhaps on the people who were throwing projectiles and bird scooters off of the bridge onto the 101 freeway and damaging those highway patrol vehicles and putting officers there at risk. And the people who've been blockading streets are going to do a lot of that, so that you can expect, as they comb through the video that's going to be everywhere after this event has wound down. They're going to be combing through all of that, and they're going to find people. This is a tactic they've been using actually since 1992 and perhaps before that. In the LA riots of 1992, people were arrested a year later, some of them, for actions that were taken during that civil unrest period because they were caught on video, and video even more prevalent now. So you can expect a lot of people who think they got away with things tonight are going to find out that they have not. LA Mayor Karen
Mark?
Bass. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask. I don't know if Air 7 HD can pull in over by City Hall, but it appears that the sheriff's mobile field force is doing some sort of operation by City Hall, possibly pushing a crowd further away.
Okay.
I saw some of their trucks and some of them launching less lethal and flashbang.
Okay, let's take a look. What you're looking at here, these are highway patrol vehicles that are kind of securing that bridge over, I believe that's a bridge over the 101 freeway. Let's go get closer to City Hall if we can and see if what Bruce is mentioning is actually happening. That would be a mutual aid situation, and we're going to see if there is a skirmish line. We see that fire, the dumpster fire that is there. Maybe are they forming around that to try to move these people out? Let's tilt down a little bit with the camera and see what we're looking at. All right, what we just saw, that appears to be fireworks that are being launched in some way by people against the officers. I do not see a skirmish line here, but let's take a look and see if there are other indications of a mutual aid response by the LA County Sheriff's Department that would help to clear these intersections and get some of these people out that are up to no good out here setting fires and the like. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Bruce, thanks for the tip. We're going to look for it. In the meantime, we want to tell you what the mayor has been saying, speaking earlier today about the need for these protests to be peaceful.
First of all, I think protests need to be peaceful, period. And any time it deteriorates into violence, that is a problem, and it absolutely messes with the overall message. That's not peaceful, what was happening. It's not peaceful for people to be on the highways. It's not peaceful for people to throw rocks or bottles. That's not peaceful. And if you are going to entertain violence, if you are going to try to take over a freeway, then you are going to suffer the consequences of doing that. I don't think that LAPD, the sheriff, and certainly not myself, are not shying away from statements like that.
The mayor adamant that law breaking will not be tolerated. The chief saying that earlier today as well, also saying that at the moment, at least as the evening was unfolding, that the department, at least in this area, was overwhelmed. And that's his word. So we're going to see whether the National Guard is going to have any effect on what's happening here. You're seeing that commercial grade fireworks that the chief talked about that are being deployed, or being not deployed, but fired. Some of that has been fired against his officers, and he spoke about the fact that that can actually kill you if it hits you. And so there is a lot going on that they are having to deal with. And the question of whether the National Guard is needed, the chief said, indicated that the first two nights they hadn't gotten to the point where they would have called them, but tonight he would have to reassess and decide or look at whether that was a necessary part of the mix. It's the numbers of people involved in this have dwindled quite a bit. There were several thousand outside City Hall that were marching around and then marching to the federal detention center in downtown LA, in the federal building. Several thousand people were there. Those numbers have dropped away to what must be a few hundred, perhaps, maybe less than that are going from one location to another, scattering around. As soon as police form a skirmish line and move them out, they go somewhere else. And what we're seeing now is some people setting fires, putting up barricades, trying to close down intersections. But the numbers of people causing trouble is about, I would say, Bruce, maybe starting to match the numbers of law enforcement people who are out there, and that may turn the tide in favor of the police. If at least if the numbers are dwindling, maybe they can get a handle on this. Bruce, you still with us? I think we've...
the numbers are kind of equaling out. They were overwhelmed earlier today and this afternoon, but I think now that you also have the sheriffs there, the manpower pool for law enforcement is greatly increased, and they can take back some of these streets. And maybe we will see a curfew later on. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a question that was asked during the press conference, whether a curfew would be implemented in LA. The chief said that he had spoken with Sheriff Luna about the possibility of a curfew being implemented, but none has been implemented thus far. It would take an action by the LA County Supervisors and the LA City Council to implement a curfew, both city and or county-wide. And that certainly has been done in the past in situations where things have gotten out of hand. Just if you're out on the streets after 10 o'clock at night or whatever time it is, you are subject to arrest, and that certainly is a tool that allows law enforcement to put an end to scenes like we're seeing here, where this fire is being set in the middle of this intersection, a food truck driving by. And so, but what we're seeing, I guess, is with the numbers dwindling, as you mentioned, the law enforcement agencies that are responding are in a better position to get a handle on this. But we should note, the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department, both well below full strength. Officers are retiring and or leaving both departments faster than they can be replaced. And along with that, there are budget constraints that are causing a real strain on police resources and police availability. We've been doing stories about how the Sheriff's Department is suffering. You know, their people are being so overtaxed that they're actually, it's affecting their alertness. They're having to work so many hours and so many days and so many shifts that it is starting to affect them physically and mentally. And there's a real concern about both the LAPD officers, the rank and file, and the Sheriff's Department rank and file about how to, whether they can deal with too many more incidents such as these. And then you have the budgetary concerns, both the city and the county, both having to make severe budget cuts, caused in large part by the response to the fires that we had in January that really put a hole in the budgets of both governments. And you really have, there's not much room to deal with this sort of thing. They're going to deal with it, but it's going to affect other things much later on. That's a story for another night. In the meantime, ABC News reporter Matt Gutman, he was out there as well behind the police lines earlier today, showing us the projectiles that were being fired and or launched by both sides in these clashes.
That line of officers from the LAPD pushing everybody back and using a tremendous amount of non-lethal force. You can see those flashbang canisters, the sponges, 40 millimeter like this, that they fired at people just to continue to push them back. I think I've seen this much of non-lethal time. We've also seen a significant number of rocks, bottles, projectiles that are very dangerous being hurled at the LAPD on this side of the skirmish line. The size of the rocks and projectiles, I'm going to see if I can try to find another one for you, that were thrown were significant. This is a piece of concrete or road that was picked up and chucked. You can see some of the sharper end stones over here, much larger ones than that were Holder police. So this is something that I haven't seen quite some time in downtown LA. It was very intense.
Indeed, and it's not something that you would expect to see in downtown LA, and we'll get to that in a second. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's comments threatening to deploy U.S. Marines on U.S. soil drew a small group of protesters. You see them there. This is at Camp Pendleton. More than 4 dozen people there holding up signs at the main gate to Camp Pendleton with slogans such as, quote, "We're on a slippery slope to fascism," and "Your oath is to the Constitution." President Trump has already federalized and deployed those National Guard troops to L.A. after the protests erupted over the immigration raids on Friday. This coming despite strong objection from the governor of California and the mayor of Los Angeles. In fact, the Newsom administration is going to file a lawsuit perhaps as early as tomorrow to try to prevent that from happening. In the meantime, Patrick Saunders, he's an Air Force veteran. He organized this protest outside Camp Pendleton.
We want to show our support to the military members that work here. We want to kind of remind them of what their duty is to us, but additionally we want to make it very publicly known that we condemn any sort of action by the administration of using active duty or National Guard troops on U.S. citizens.
U.S. Northern Command confirms 500 Marines from 29 Palms are on what's called prepare to deploy status. That means they're ready to go should they be needed, and quote, to augment and support the DoD's protection of federal property and personnel efforts. And there's a live look now at downtown Los Angeles. Still spot fires here and there. Still groups of people gathering, mainly at intersections, either blocking them, barricading them, or setting fires. There have been some continued skirmishes with police, and there was a guy in a minivan that started driving around erratically and nearly took some people out. He's under arrest. Some 10 other people, at least, that we know of as of earlier this evening are under arrest by the LAPD. 17 others arrested by the Highway Patrol. Both of those numbers are expected to go up as we continue to watch the law enforcement response to the unrest that is taking place in Los Angeles. I'm joined now by Jory Rand. You've been covering this all day, and you kind of watched this evolve throughout the day. And what did you notice, and what struck you?
It seems that tensions are rising and falling as we go throughout the day, and it seems like there's a group of troublemakers who, when things are calming down, they start things back up again. We see things calm down, then we see 5 Waymo cars lit on fire. We see that start to calm down. We see a barricade situation with furniture grabbed from Grand Park. We see that calm down, and then we see protesters all over the city starting fires. This gentleman, that's something I've never seen before. Typically, when we see a gathering like this, you do see people start to treat this like a street takeover and start doing donuts. So when you first see that, you just think that person is part of it. They clearly were not, as they drew the attention of those gathered there and then took off through the city in what we have seen. But again, it is a group of people who have been allowed to do this. We saw the protesters who were on the overpass of the 101 freeway. Once the 101 was cleared and it looked like order had been restored, those people were allowed to stay on top of the 101 freeway, and they started pouring things on top of those CHP vehicles that were parked below, and that was allowed to continue for hours. Now,
that was a mistake, clearly, by law enforcement. You don't leave people, you know, if maybe they didn't have the resources. I shouldn't say it was a mistake, but it turned out it didn't work well.
It did not work out well, and you look at the numbers of the protesters out there, the numbers of law enforcement, and what happens if they decide to go in and make a move on these people. What's going to happen? Is that going to start a really violent confrontation with authorities? Is that going to start a panic where you start sending people running through a situation where you have a potential trampling of a crowd? It's a very tough situation for them to be in, and the fact that they left those vehicles exposed and the protesters in place on the overpass made it for a very disastrous situation.
It is a thin line between enforcement and provocation. It is a line that the LAPD and other local police agencies have trod, sometimes successfully, sometimes catastrophically badly, for decades, dating back to 1965.
And
Watts riots.
it's actually been impressive to see some of the restraint we've seen from these different jurisdictions, because they have been under siege all day with projectiles and bottles and rocks and fireworks and smoke canisters, and very little response from the LAPD. Very few arrests. We've talked about, 27 throughout the day from 2 different jurisdictions. There could easily have been hundreds of arrests given the behavior we have seen on the streets of Los Angeles.
What they're trying to do is get the streets cleared, restore order as quickly as possible and as thoroughly as possible. They're having trouble doing that tonight because the crowd is dispersing and going from place to place. If, as Bruce Thomas mentioned, a retired law enforcement officer, if that mutual aid response is now in effect and taking effect, you'll see other agencies coming in and providing the manpower, providing the bodies, basically, and secure, take ground and hold it, using the ground that they've taken. So that's what's hopefully a helpful development in this as we watch live now what's happening in downtown LA. These are pictures from Air 7, Spring Street and 2nd Street. That vehicle there that's on the side of the road, I don't know if that has been vandalized and is immobile because of that, or whether someone is parking there and doing it deliberately. What we are seeing, and the chief mentioned these people that go from place to place, and they cause mayhem, they cause problems, and they are dressed in hoodies, they're dressed in black, and they bring hammers and they chip at the concrete, and that's where they get their rocks from. I was going to mention that when we talked about what Matt Gutman, rocks being thrown by around down, scattered around. Projectiles by bringing hammers and hammering at the concrete and the asphalt and taking what chips away and throwing it at police. we have Brian Mueller, who's a retired law enforcement officer here in Southern California. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you have seen how things have unfolded tonight. What is your take on how the different law enforcement agencies are responding and whether it's been effective?
They do a lot of training together. It does take some time to muster up enough personnel to be effective and not be overwhelmed. The crowds are obviously a lot larger than the number of officers that are available. And therefore, it tends to change who is in command of a certain area. It's in the city, it's LAPD, it's parts of in the middle of the city like Grand Park and a few of the county buildings, it's Sheriff's Department. And obviously, as we all saw, right next to that, the 101 freeway, which is the jurisdiction of CHP. So communication is always tough in these type of situations. There's only so many radio frequencies. There's a lot of things going on. A lot of people, but trying to maneuvers to. And obviously, we all saw it did take, in my opinion, too long. But maybe there was some other things going on. They couldn't release some personnel to secure the high ground. You always want to have a high ground, but the high ground is LA City's turf, if you will, and not the CHP. So that created a little bit of a problem. Mm-hmm. But it usually takes a few hours for everything to start working. You don't want a big crowd of people in one area unless you have enough people to keep them in there. You're going to start making some arrests. But when you scatter them, when you disperse them, they tend to create problems all over the place. So if you can keep them moving up in a certain area by your personnel, your law enforcement personnel being able to maneuver, you can keep them from getting in a big power base. Environmental weapons or lines of police officers. So when you have the officers in a static line, then they become more vulnerable. But if they have a maneuver capability, it's better for the officers, and you're able to disperse crowds.
The different agencies in LA City and County have dealt with disturbances ranging in size from Laker parades that get out of hand, all the way to the unrest of 1992 and the George Floyd unrest that took place and the rioting and the vandalism that took place there, to what we're seeing tonight. There's different ranges, but over the years they've learned different things and different tactics with regard to crowd control. How equipped, just from a training standpoint, are the police, these two different agencies, or at least speak to your agency about crowd control? How much training do officers get? How much tactical experience would you expect some of these deputies to have? And how is that brought to bear?
Well, there's quite a bit of training that takes place. There's in the Police Post Academy, Learning Domain 24 has to do with disturbances. That's the initial training. Deputy personnel get a lot of emergency response team training in the custodial environment. And then again, when they go to patrol school, get a little dose of it again. And then recurrent training in field operations, and especially when will be coming up, like for example, the World Cup or a presidential election, or things that Intel tells us that is likely to have some type of problem. Efforts will be made to focus on mobile field force, crowd control, use of force, non-lethal weapons, training so we're better prepared. Stations will make sure that their personnel, they have their helmets and their face shields that are in good working order, and have all their flex cuffs and mass booking procedures all dialed in, so everybody's tuned up, ready to go if a mobile field force has to get together and come together. Most police cars, deputies, policemen are one person in the car for the most part, and handle things by themselves until situations like this come together where there's just too many. And because we are outnumbered, we have to come together in what we call a mobile field force, basically a well-choreographed drill team. A smaller group of people being able to intervene in a bigger group of people, incorporating a variety of formations, movements, strategies, tactics, declaring unlawful assembly, having arrest teams, staging areas, mobile bookings, and a variety of things. Cameras, recording them. securing county buildings, county courthouses, hospitals, critical things that are needed to run a government, run a city, and that are needed even after this protest goes away. And also protect themselves. You don't want to get too deep in a big mob of people and not have the wherewithal to extract yourself. Additionally, with the you need to know what the commander's intent is. How do we want this thing to look like when we're done with this thing?
Right. And we talked earlier about the fine line between provocation and enforcement, between getting the job done of getting the people who are causing problems off the street, arresting them, moving the crowd out, versus inflaming a crowd. When LA erupted in 1965, I know you're far too young for that, but it was because a man named Marquette Frye was stopped by the CHP for a DUI. And a crowd gathered around the arresting officers, and one of them shoved a woman, and that became, the rumor mill said that they had shoved a pregnant woman to the ground, and that is how that riot actually began in 1965. Started at 113th and Avalon, I believe. And so there's they're out there to do the job, but you can cause a provocation as well. And when you're out there doing crowd control, how do you prevent that sort of a provocation from happening that might inflame the crowd further?
Well, I was only 3 at that time, but we're not there. We don't want to start the very riot we're trying to prevent. But there was obviously a lot of other tensions in the community back then, because just one shove of one person should not have sparked off a whole riot back in '65. So there's other things that are beyond what the officers were doing. But, it is a fine line. We're trying to allow people to exercise their First Amendment, peacefully protest, and that's the key word, peaceful. And to declare an unlawful assembly, they are either already breaking and destroying things, or violence is imminent. It's about to go off, and so the incident commander or whoever's on the front line there, who has the decision-making authority, can give the command to give an unlawful assembly. And then people fail to leave, then they could be arrested for that. Now, I heard earlier on some other channels, maybe it was yours, about the issue of people wearing masks. Why do they need a mask? It's not illegal to wear a mask, but it's illegal to wear a mask after you've committed a different crime, and that being the failure to disperse. And then wearing a mask at that time.
Interesting. Okay, so that is something that's in your bag of tricks, as it were, when you're dealing with people who are being unruly or potentially causing harm to officers, throwing things at you, for example. That once that's happened.
Yes, that's true. And we're not trying to make arrests. Believe me, the officers would rather be doing their regular patrol and having their Starbucks somewhere. But when we come together, we'd rather have people leave and go away. But they don't. And so you have to make the choice of either we disappear and then they destroy the city and destroy property and people get injured who are unaware of something going on the street and they drive in the middle of it, and then people are going to go, where were the police? Where was the sheriff? So when we are there trying to keep the peace. It can be a focal point by people who are determined to create a confrontation. The police officers are not there to try to create a confrontation. The people want it, but they will always, in my experience, were more likely than not wanting a provocation. You'll notice that you tend to have a lot more cars going to areas where the protests are happening because they want to get involved. They want to see it. They want to get a little clip on their smartphone to put it on Instagram or something. And they create a problem also by showing up in an area that's clearly got some police activity going on there, and that makes it difficult for the officers. So it's tough. You end up putting up with a lot of abuse verbally, a lot of things thrown at you from different directions. I do know that some different tactics different agencies use. Some officers, their protocols, they'll stand there in a skirmish line and allow the mob of people to get really, really close to them. And that's very volatile. And people, a few protests deep in the mob of protesters, will throw something over the top, and it may injure significantly the officers. And as we saw, particularly when SRT rolled out to the Fairfax district in May 30th of 2020, they were not peaceful. They were throwing chunks of concrete, and as you guys have reported on the news, a lot of fireworks. Those things will fly faster and farther than a lot of our less lethal projectiles, and they are explosive devices.
Yeah.
We've had some uniforms burned. We've had ears where people had hearing issues afterwards, had to get medical treatment for it. So it is a difficult position to be in to try and facilitate First Amendment peaceful protests. But like I said earlier, when they're creating havoc or destroying things and being violent, they are no longer peaceful. They have removed themselves from First Amendment protection. Mm-hmm. Or if violence is imminent, declare an lawful assembly. And then if they fail to leave, arrest for that. And if they're wearing a mask, arrest them for also wearing a mask.
Right. Okay. Well, Brian Mueller, retired sheriff's deputy, we thank you for your insight. What we're looking at here is right near Crypto.com Arena. And we got word that a crowd was gathering there. We don't know if these are people who are being peaceful or if they're just watching and seeing what's going on, or they're just wandering around in the streets, or if there is something else to this. We're not seeing any sort of violent activity going on right now. You see people walking with flags. You see people walking down the street. I did see one thing being thrown, but it didn't appear to be targeting anybody. And so we're going to keep an eye on this situation. We began our, as we look at this, we began our 8 o'clock hour with a news conference by the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, Jim McDonnell. Here's a recap of what he had to say.
LAPD was not given advance notice that the federal operations would occur in that area. As a result, we were not pre-positioned to respond immediately to unrest related to those actions. Once the call for assistance came in, LAPD responded within 38 minutes. And that sounds like a long time, but I'll tell you why that is. The response was impacted by traffic, crowd density in the area with unrest occurring, hazardous conditions caused by tear gas that was previously deployed by federal agents at that location. Many of our officers, because it was put together in a mobile field force configuration without advance notice, were not equipped with gas masks. But despite these challenges, we moved in quickly and as safely as possible. At no point did LAPD ignore or intentionally delay any request for help. I also want to be unequivocally clear. The Los Angeles Police Department does not participate in or coordinate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement on civil immigration enforcement. We've said this over and over again, and I can't stress it enough for the people in our community who have high levels of anxiety about this issue, that we want everybody to believe and be able to call the LAPD in time of need if they've been a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime. We need that. Otherwise, the system does not work. That has been our policy and remains our policy, and it went into effect in 1979. So 46 years ago, that's been the way we do business. On the other hand, however, when a law enforcement agency, any agency, requests emergency assistance to protect lives, we are obligated to respond, and we do. Public safety is our duty, and we will answer every legitimate call for help from anyone. We recognize that immigration enforcement operations can cause a deep fear and anxiety, particularly in immigrant communities. That's why we're committed to transparency, accountability, and treating every Angelino with respect, regardless of their immigration status. Our job is not to divide or politicize law enforcement. Our job is simply to keep everyone safe.
It is an environment, though, in which law enforcement has, to some extent, been politicized. We have the Department of Justice and people from Homeland Security saying that the local agencies are not doing their jobs. They'd accused the LA Police Department of not responding to a call for help from the ICE agents and other federal agents who were involved in what they're calling an immigration enforcement action in one part of the city. The chief emphatically saying that did not happen, that it took some time for officers to respond because they hadn't gotten advance notice. Officers, in order to respond to that, need to be especially formed into action teams to do that, and that takes some time. The reports had been, or the information that had been put out, was that it took 2 hours for LAPD to respond. That was not the case. The chief saying it took 38 minutes from the time the call went out to the time officers got there, and they were delayed in part because tear gas had been deployed, and that the officers were not prepared to deal with tear gas because they had not been given advance notice. Still, they went in and assisted the federal agents in protecting them and keeping them separate from the crowd that was beginning to gather. Governor Gavin Newsom, meanwhile, posting on X tonight, and I'm quoting here, "Let's get this straight. 1, local law enforcement didn't need help. 2, Trump sent troops anyway to manufacture chaos and violence. 3, Trump succeeded. 4, now things are destabilized and we need to send in more law enforcement just to clean up Trump's mess." That is a direct quote from the governor from his tweet tonight. The war of words between Governor Newsom and President Trump escalating tonight. This is also a photo that we got from the governor's office, him meeting with Chief McDonnell and Sheriff Luna. This happening earlier today. Room of some sort, and Governor Newsom tweeting this: "Joined LAPD, LA County Sheriff's Department, and state emergency officials in LA as we respond to protests provoked by chaos from Washington. We're here to keep the peace, not play into Trump's political games." Again, that is a direct quote from the governor. The president saying that there is chaos on the streets of LA, and he used the word insurrection to describe the people who are committing some acts of violence and setting fires. He's saying they're insurrectionists, and that is, as we have been pointing out tonight, not a randomly chosen word. That is an important word because the auspices under which the president can perhaps invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807 would require that an insurrection be undertaken against the United States and against its government so that the president could then deploy troops to put down that insurrection. And that, thence the threat from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that Marines from Camp Pendleton could be deployed to the streets of Los Angeles. Marines, U.S. Marines deployed against or to contain U.S. citizens and be involved in enforcement action against American citizens. LA Mayor Karen Bass speaking earlier today about the history and the challenges of dealing with large crowds in this city.
Because our city has always had a very robust immigrant rights movement and infrastructure and institutions that have been around for several decades, there is a history of having peaceful protests here. Now, you know, like any crowd, if we're talking about after an athletic event, everybody celebrates. There's always a handful of people that tend to be at the end and tend to hang around and might get into mischief and violence. But that's not the people who are putting on the protests. I tell you that to say that when those protests have been organized, they've been organized in a proper way. The problem is what happens at the end, and that's one thing that is difficult with crowd control, whether it is a political protest or whether it is a football game.
That is the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, who we'll be speaking to on ABC 7 in just a matter of a few minutes. In the meantime, we're going to take a look and continue to take a look at what is going on downtown right now at outside Crypto.com Arena and LA Live. This is South Figueroa at Olympic. Worth noting, the crowd that we are seeing are people walking down the middle of the street. We are not seeing any acts of violence. Doesn't mean it's not happening. We haven't seen it. And we're not seeing any fires being set. What we are seeing are people waving flags of various flags, Mexican flags, American flags, Palestinian flags, and from flags of various countries that they are carrying. But what we're not seeing is any sorts of acts of violence or unrest. This is right near Crypto.com Arena. That's it on the left, LA Live, part of that complex. And we don't know if law enforcement officers are being deployed there. This is in downtown Los Angeles. As you can see, the gleaming structures, these skyscrapers in downtown Los Angeles amid what has been a pretty difficult day in this city in terms of the things that we have seen and the things that we are having to witness and deal with once again in the city of Los Angeles. Raids by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, targeting immigrants who do not have their correct authorization to be in the United States. They're after criminals and prey on this crowd. On their way to school, and in fact going after people who are in the federal building itself, in the system, at the agency, trying to get their situation straight, and they're ended up being arrested during that process while they're actually preparing for an immigration hearing. So there's a lot of emotion surrounding this, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of fear in the immigrant community in Los Angeles. What we're seeing now, it looks like a contingent of officers. The agency, I'm not sure yet. I'm guessing, I'm betting it's LAPD. And they are heading, right now this is Temple and Alameda. We don't know if they're relieving other officers or if they're heading toward Crypto.com or what. But there is a citywide tactical alert. No police officers are being allowed once their shift ends. Nobody's going home. And they're all staying on, and that keeps the manpower in place to both deal with this situation in downtown LA and also with whatever else is happening within the city. There are other things happening. Homes are being broken into, people are still being robbed, all kinds of disturbances are happening that have nothing to do with what we're seeing here that the LA Police Department has to deal with as a police agency in Los Angeles. Skirmish line forming. This is Alameda and Aliso in downtown Los Angeles. More officers being deployed there. We're seeing resources being brought to bear. We don't know what the target is of this skirmish line, but we're going to try to find out. In the meantime, we want to show you some video from earlier that has become pretty much iconic and has gone viral. And that is this. This was downtown. This was earlier in the afternoon towards the evening when the demonstration near the federal building complex began to turn violent, in which people were setting Waymo cars on fire. These cars were parked on the street and just sitting there, and someone set them on fire. And the mayor pointed out that there are people there that are protesting, and then there are people who are bent on committing acts of violence and vandalism and arson. And she was very clear that those who are doing the latter will be dealt with the full force of the law. The LA County DA, the same thing, the chief of police, all the different law enforcement agencies and their representatives are saying exactly that whoever set these fires, they're going to find you, and they're going to bring the full extent of the law to bear to put you in a place of accountability where you will pay for what has been done. There's a lot of video that's being put out there. There's a lot of video on social media. The cameras are ubiquitous, and it is very likely that whoever set these crimes was in fact caught on video, whoever set these fires, and there is an effort underway, or that will be underway shortly, to bring that person to justice. And then, speaking of somebody who was brought to justice, the guy here in this minivan. This is at an intersection where people had gathered, and you see him going in circles backwards, and people throwing rocks at him, at the vehicle. We don't know which started first. Was he driving erratically? Because when our camera got onto him, it was kind of just starting there, but we don't know whether they were throwing rocks at him first or whether he started erratically first. But the erratic driving, we know, continued after that. This is a guy that had no shirt on and appeared to be very agitated because he took off at a high rate of speed, as you see here, with all the people on the streets, law enforcement officers, civilians, everybody that is out there tonight. This was an incredibly dangerous thing. For him to do. Very high rate of speed, driving around. He went to Alvera Street, got into a collision there, was backing up, driving erratically again. There were several minor collisions with inanimate objects. The vehicle was able to keep going. He eventually came to a stop, and the sheriff's department, on a mutual aid situation, came in, and 2 deputies arrested him quickly and without further incident. And as far as we know, nobody was hurt, but as you can see from that video, it was a very near thing. people very nearly got hurt, or someone could have actually been killed. Let's look live now. This is Alameda and Cesar Chavez Avenue. I don't know what that object is in the middle of the street or what people are doing here. Those are some cones. People are kind of grabbing up what they can and setting them. For some reason, they want to set them in the middle of intersections, and sometimes they set them on fire. Now you see LAPD setting up a skirmish line to try to clear this intersection. This is Alameda Street. This and not far from a place where ICE had been staging on Thursday night. You may recall, it seems like months ago, just a couple of days ago, ICE officers, federal officers, staged in a parking lot in Chinatown, and as word got out that they were there, people started to show up and were surrounding them, and they were on the sidewalk and they were protesting. They were demonstrating against them. They were yelling at the officers. There were some bottles thrown. There were some objects thrown. But first of all, the crowd was small, and it was almost completely peaceful with one or two exceptions. The ICE officers put out a call. Look at that. That's the fireworks we've been talking about that have been thrown at police and at law enforcement. ICE officers put out a call for help because they felt that they were going to be overwhelmed by the people who were around. And that was when the LAPD responded, not as the federal agents would have wanted, but they got there and they dealt with the situation, and people ended up being cleared from a sidewalk. We have our Jory Rand, who has been here with ABC7 covering what has been happening for most of the day here, and he joins us now with another report. Jory?
Yeah, we continue to see unrest here. In particular, is pointing to in why he has brought in members of the California National Guard under his control. Tonight, the governor wants to turn to the president today, he maintain order.
National Guard troops are necessary. The governor said there's no need. The LAPD has said there's no need. And really, all of this seems to be an unwarranted escalation. The president has the capacity. He should. And it's been very
federal troops, not California National Guard, not National Guard from any state, but actual military. Gave the president the authority to use U.S. military in that situation against U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. But the caveat, of course, there needs to be an insurrection against the U.S. government happening. At least twice today, the president of the United States has called the demonstrators on the streets of L.A. insurrectionists perhaps setting the ground to bring in those military members, the Marines from Camp Pendleton. So far, that has not happened. We also learned from CNN reporting that the state's Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis, says that tomorrow a lawsuit will be filed to go against Trump's order to nationalize the California National Guard. So we have legal battles brewing on several fronts, and we will see how this plays out continuing on the streets of LA, but continuing tomorrow in a courtroom, at least on one legal front, and we'll see what happens, Mark, with the military, whether the Insurrection Act will be invoked. Coming up at 11 o'clock, we'll hear from another legal professor on the implications and the possibilities of that happening here in LA.
Indeed. Jory Rand, thank you. Battles both legal and rhetorical as we look at video of actual dumpster fires. Congress being detained by stop the Atlanta this morning, and attorney people being detained, but they were not allowed inside. Take a listen.
Let us in. Let us in. The moment that we came here, they